everyone receives is a reflection of us.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome. Class is in session. No, actually, this one is about something that occurred to me today. Fascinating. I was in a shop having discussions with someone who wasn't on duty. So he was wearing a t-shirt, and that t-shirt was the Ninja Turtles. And on that shirt was Raphael. Now, I mentioned before about Raphael coming to visit me. Maybe he was speaking through this gentleman, I don't know. But I'd like to enlighten you on the conversation. You see, this isn't a judgmental one. This is how people react, how they see things. Maybe it was a test. And I'll explain that later. Because as the discussion went on, there was lots of talks between aliens and the secrecies and conspiracies of the world. But one thing I was trying to explain to him, which was the difference between empaths and sociopaths. And I said to him that a sociopath is basically the opposite end of the spectrum to the empath. Almost as if it is an empath who has shut themselves down or turned off all their senses. One who is the complete opposite. Now, see, an empath is someone who feels, absorbs, and are highly sensitive to people's emotions, while a sociopath is someone that lacks any of it, or has no remorse or emotional connection, and are driven by self-interests. This is basically two ends of the same emotional spectrum. But he couldn't understand that. He couldn't grasp it. He couldn't piece it together, what I was trying to say. And I was saying to him that I am an empath, and as that, I understand what it's like. I was trying to give him a same sort of scenario, whereby you have someone who is skilled, like a doctor, for example. Now that doctor within his hands has the capability of murdering someone or killing someone, but they choose not to do it. It is two ends of the spectrum, someone who has the knowledge to do that and someone who has the knowledge to save life. And I was explaining to him these sorts of balances, between either or. And he couldn't piece it. He struggled to find the reasoning behind it. Now you see, there are two types where they join together. And this is why I say they are similar. It's because you have dark empaths and what's called cognitive empathy. Now, these are basically the way of understanding people's emotions without actually feeling them. You use a type of sociopathic understanding. So you use the idea of how people are feeling to manipulate them. Whereas in dark empaths, you basically understand the feelings, but then use that for manipulative purposes. It's fascinating. And I found it strange, and I didn't harbor on that he couldn't make this connection. So I basically said to things like, it is the light to the dark, the willingness to give up, the acceptance of sociopaths versus empaths. But you see, I found that fascinating how someone who believes so much in science, and this is what he did, and the understanding of things, couldn't grasp that it was two opposites, the other end of the straw. But it was okay. But what I found interesting was, as he kept claiming that he believes in the science, I asked him this, and I said, what about the ice cube? These are going into those sort of melting of the ice cap conspiracies. I said, have you done that test? He said, no. I said, okay, we'll place an ice cube in the water. Draw a line on the water, and when the ice cube melts, the water will not rise, because the displacement of air inside the ice cube pushes the water up. So when that cube melts, it fills that space of air. Now, he said, but what about the parts above the water? And I said to him, as long as that piece of land or ice is buoyant in the water will not rise. If, for example, that ice is on the edge of the cup, but not in the water, then yes, the water will rise. If the ice is the actual container of the water, and a piece breaks off of that into the water, then the water will rise. And again, it dumbfounded me, because this is quite a simple scientific test that we all do as kids. Even if you put an ice cube on top of an ice cube that is buoyant in the water, it still will not rise, even if the top ice cube is not on the water, because of the weight. But he'd not done this, fully grown man. So it's interesting. So I asked him to do it, because I think so many people are there to guide us. So many people are there to show us the way. Some will argue points, but they're not smart in others. So this whole scenario, I'm understanding where his mindset's at, where his level's at, where his understanding of science that he claims to be, without judgment, just understanding. But you see, something interesting happened again while talking through this man of science. He's basically started talking about the COVID stuff, and we got into a lot of it. But you see, one of the most interesting things was he said that it was okay for people to eradicate the humans because of science, because the vaccine was out there and they needed to cull that many people because there was too many on the earth. And I was shocked. But then someone who can't understand the difference of empathy and sociopath, is that probably why? Does that level of science saying we must eradicate human culture through vaccine without any remorse at all, without any indication of, well, what about the people that died, that were forced into it? There was no empathy there. Was he showing me signs of the very thing that he could not understand? Possibly. So I called him Thanos, of course. But it was fascinating, because as we kept talking, it kept responding that someone who is there for science, who believes in it so much, and is okay with the killing of thousands and the culling of thousands and millions of people because there's too many, without finding an alternative way and showing any remorse about it, well, that's sociopath. So we continued. I didn't judge or blame. It was just showing traits of these things. Because some people can show those ideas but not realize that it's a part of them. It doesn't mean they're a bad person. It just means they have those traits. And so we continued. We talked more about the government stuff and how housing and immigration. And one thing that popped up is the immigration, which really got under his skin. So I mentioned how housing prices are a shortage and immigration is on the rise here and creating a housing shortage, and he lost it. He basically, something that gets under his skin so much, he hates it to the very point that he hates when people say that. And he showcased it. But see, I wasn't saying anything that the immigrants are causing the housing shortage, but that's what he took. So now we lead into another understanding that whatever's inside him, that when people are talking about immigrants being the problem, there is something internally within him that is causing it. Whether family was abused for being immigrants, or something along the line where immigrants get blamed for everything. Now, he said to me that we're not having an immigration problem and we don't have a housing shortage. I laughed and said, "Are you sure?" And it was fascinating because he took something from my words that I never said. I never said that immigrants were causing the housing shortage. It is that of the government. And I said to him that it is because of demand. He refused. He said, "No, it's not because of that." I said, "Well, actually it is, because what happens is when the governments create a monopoly in housing and they introduce more laws and regulations around, they bully out the mama and papa stores, the individual builders. So they create a monopoly in the building market. They then have those builders create shortages so that they are the only ones building. The government, instead of buying new land to build new houses on, are buying existing ones. So therefore they bring in more migrants across. And then that's creating more shortage in houses, which is driving the housing shorting up, supply versus demand. That's common sense. So the government are creating that problem, especially here in Australia. It is not the migrants' fault. They are just the people who are trapped in this whole cycle. It is the people above them. You see, he was so enthralled or enraged by that comment, I moved it on. What I found out was that he hates the rich. He said it's all the rich's fault or problem. And this is quite dangerous, because the fake wording of rich can be determined by the supreme wealthy. But you see, rich can also be family. It can also be farmers who are rich with land but not cash. So the definition that rich are all the problem, tax the rich and we'll all be fine, is not a common way of doing it. Tax big businesses and corporations that don't pay enough tax, absolutely. But some people have worked hard to get the rich and the wealth that they have. They are not a part of the problem. Farmers certainly aren't. The people that have worked their way up through business to create a store that didn't sell out to the government, they are not a problem. So his definition of rich is interesting, because is it the government, the people in power, the elites, the ones who have the trillions of dollars? Are they part of the problem? Of course. But I wouldn't say they're rich. I'd say they are fake leaders or people with positions of power. Yes, they have tremendous wealth, but they are not rich. So the people that are causing the problem with immigration, people that are causing it with housing, are the leaders, are the government, people who believe they have status. But you see, he's adamant that it's the rich's fault. Again, something internally must be whether or not he sees himself as rich, or there is some type of trauma associated to that he can't let go of. But it's fascinating, because he's getting into more of the consciousness side of things, what people do, the psychic abilities, but yet he's an atheist. So he sees things differently. But it's fascinating, because I then said to him, so all of this stuff we've been talking about, all of the problems in the world, from the files to the housing problems to the finances to the government, let's put that aside for a second and leave it over there in the distance just to look at. Now focus inwardly on yourself, the love you have for yourself and the love you have for your family, and how that feels. And I asked him, I said, how does that feel? And he goes, but that's greedy. How would you then go out and then see yourself as better than someone else and trample on them? And I said to him, don't put words in my mouth. That is not what I said. Because as you can see, people who are in that mindset now think, but if I think of myself before others, I am greedy. To which I replied, what happens in the air line demonstrations when they tell you the oxygen mask falls. They tell you to put it on first before helping others. This situation is no different. You help yourself, you heal yourself before you heal others. So I was saying, when you have love for yourself, love for your family, when you walk outside, you're not judging people straight away and looking at them and condemning them. You are embodying that love frequency. So when you walk out there, everyone is family. You're treating people with kindness and respect because that is what they deserve, because that is how you walk. But it's fascinating because the way some people see it is it's greedy. And it's interesting because everyone has a different way of looking at things. Everyone has a different understanding of things. You don't shut someone down even though they are argumentative, or they might have opposing opinions of you. So I go back to Raphael. Was this a challenge, a test to see how do I handle people with opposing differences, especially when it conflicts knowledge of myself? Especially when I have knowledge of how government systems work, or how housing ministers do their things, or how COVID injections for the elites and stuff like that were non-existent. Which is fascinating because our politicians here in Australia were exempt from taking it. But he didn't know that. He wasn't sure about it. And I said, no, it's fact. Because I lived it, I've been through it. And a lot of people, when they hear these things, are not willing to believe someone unless they see it themselves, especially from an atheist point of view. They have to see it for themselves, and trust in others is hard for them, or hard for that person. It's not a collective thing. So I said to him, a lot of those caps as well, it's come from a nurse. It's come from nurses. They've said that 20 years experience, all of these politicians who got the wrong colored tip in needles, saying that that specific one should have been a blue tip, but yet they received a yellow tip, or whatever colors they were, which meant that it was saline solution. These are nurses who have been in the industry 20 years, and I said that to him, and he said, well, no, I've known nurses who have been batshit crazy. And again, he refused to accept my side of the story, my understanding, even though I've lived it and seen it, and the trust I have, potentially because he's had false or bad experiences himself and cannot trust it again. He also stated that the ideology of going out and placing yourself above others is a false way. It's a bad way to live. I agreed. I said you should never do that. But you see, I think he was trying to find something within himself to prove it was right. But like I said, with Raphael, I'm not here to persuade someone. I'm not here to say you are right or you are wrong. I'm here to offer multiple opinions, that you can choose one way or another. You can be buried or hidden behind stories and lies, or you can open doors and see some truth. Whether the rich sentiments or how I see things or how I explain them was all to show me that I am to be supremely wealthy, and that I should not harbor those types of attitudes moving forward. Do not be like the rich and manipulate others. Potentially, why not? If I am to be a leader, then how do I handle situations like this when confronted with conflicting data or people who choose not to believe? You can agree with them all you like. But see, when you're faced with a lot of this confrontation, it's the same things that happen with Charlie Kirk. You are fighting fire with fire. A lot of these people who are there to help and argue or to have discussions place brick walls because they're trying to tell them they are wrong and they are right. And that is not the way to go about it. You only generate more angst or more brick walls, more aggression from each other, because each one is trying to prove they are right. But both are right and both are wrong. There's no real understanding of what is. It is just our perception on what it can be. So I ended it with the whole conversation and I said, all things aside, no matter what you believe, what I believe, or what it is, there is only one thing that can actually heal the world, and that is the truth. Apart from love, of course. But with love comes truth. The more and more that information is put out into the public with this discord of information, and no one understands what's the difference between AI and reality. No one knows what's real anymore and what's fake, and what's being put out there as distractions and what is truth. And that is half of the problem. The truths are now incorporated and messed in with all of the lies. So to find it is difficult. So the best way to understand all of this is to say, truth and love will heal the world. Because when people know the truth, they cannot argue from a perspective of what they think it is. That truth is everything from religion to government power to misuse of money and power and wealth, ownership to what happened to all the natives, everything associated to that, the medical industry, the farming, nature, all of it. To aliens, everything, to Antarctica, all of it. The truth is what will set us free. The problem is we have leaders who believe they are the rich, who are not telling us. And that is why we are at separation between humanity, left ourselves to decide who is right and who is wrong, not to come together and realize that there is a truth, and together we can find it. So that is a tale of something that happened today. Whether it's a precaution for me to how to deal with people moving forward, or maybe it's just an understanding, like when the wealth is here, don't be like that. Maybe it's just learning the difference between one or the other, or just having a good conversation. Maybe the effect that I had made resonance effect, because when someone came in to the store, they distracted me. They were a disruptor. I was talking about things associating to what it meant from internally and personally. And this young person walked in, and automatically I felt a disruption in the air. I couldn't think straight. They were doing something within themselves. They were carrying a bag as well, but very young. So something that they had or did was disruptive to me. Now that could be both ways. That could be positive or negative, so that I didn't talk too much about a specific subject. I don't know. But then when everyone in there left, so did that person. And then we continued. So maybe those people were not meant to hear that, or maybe they were trying to disrupt the energy inside so that people didn't feel the love. I don't know. But it's fascinating what happens when you start speaking your truth. When you start speaking from the heart and including everyone, having debate, healthy debate, and getting people to heal because they highlight the problems within themselves and they learn something too. And that is how you want to leave, with a smile on your face and money in your wallet. So it is with that, I leave you with peace and love. Take care.